topic this year is dedication to the Dharma, practice and service. So for the Dharma talks on Sundays, this is our topic. When you hear the Dharma, the practice and the service, it might sound that these are three different things, or three categories. In fact, they are one, but with different functions. The function of Dhamma, the teaching of the Buddha, is to explain, to guide, and to help us understand the truth, so that we can see the path, the right path, not just an ordinary path that we walk on. The Dhamma is like the eyes that navigates. Try close your eyes and walk on the path and see what is going to happen. We won't have any direction, right? Now the function of practice is implementation. To put the concepts that we learn so that we can realize and experience the truth. This is just like our feet. That we need to use them to walk on the path, right? Just seeing is not enough. We have to actually walk on the path so that we can reach the final goal. Okay? But just walking without the Dhamma is just like I just mentioned. Close your eyes and walk on the path. We won't be able to know where we're going. We won't know the direction. But we also need to walk on it. Just seeing and enjoying it is not enough. It's not going to take us to the final goal. And what is the function of the service? Function of the service is to prove, to extend, to put the Dhamma that we learn, the concepts that we learn, and the experience we actually walking on the path to help us to advance. So just seeing, just walking is not enough. It's not enough. So we need to actually expand our horizon. We need to actually put the practice so that we can take one step after another step after another step, advancing on the path. This is the function of the service. Also, there is another function that when we are doing the service, we are not only serving ourselves as practitioners, we also want to try to benefit the others. If you go to a restaurant, you taste the good food, you want to recommend this to your friends and your families, right? This is the function of doing the service. Sounds like they are different things, but they are actually inseparable. Now, on this path of liberation, each practitioner has their own state, own level. Therefore, they might emphasize differently. For example, a beginner might want to start just listening to the teaching, just learning the concepts. But a seasoned practitioner may want to perform services. Or some may start with just serving, whether they're beginners or seasoned practitioners. They might want to do the serving, and then from the serving, they will be inspired to dig deeper and deeper on what is going on, what is this Dhamma, what is the concept, what is the teaching. So, and then a lot of people that I have come across with, they would like to do all three of them at one time. Fine. So whether we are starting from one point or doing everything at one time, that is fine. It doesn't matter which way we choose, as long as we continue to practice, as long as we continue to progress on this path of liberation. So that is very important. Now, what is the purpose of the Buddha's teaching? He's trying to help us eradicating our defiance of fixations so that we can put an end to the miseries or suffering. As a sentient being, we live in this world. We're born as human. Does that mean that we're so superior that we're happy all the time, that we don't encounter any misery or any suffering at all? If you say that, yes, I'm happy. I live in a very luxury house. I drive a Mercedes. I have a good husband or wife. I have a good family with great children. Fine. Let me ask you one question. Have you ever been sick? I mean, bodily, physically, and mentally. Have you ever been sad? Have you ever been facing the fact that you're encountering people that you don't like, I don't want to say spouse, but how about your boss? How about your subordinates? What if that, for those who dear to you, like your parents, that they get sick and they departed? Are they sadness? Are they miseries? Are they suffering? How about ourselves? Are we going to get old at all? You may say that, yeah, I'm aging gracefully. But eventually, where is our final end? Let's think about that. This is what we call suffering, miseries. Okay? So let's face the fact that life, no matter how happy we are, because of anicca, impermanent, that eventually we are going to face a lot of misery, a lot of suffering. So we're actually bounded by what we call the three poisons. What are they? Craving. Craving for happiness is another type of craving. Craving for nirvana, liberation, is another type of craving, so be very careful here. Aversion. And also ignorance. You say that, I have a PhD. How can you call me ignorant? I won't give you the answer. But I would recommend a book. This book is called What the Buddha Taught by Rahula. We might have some extra copies downstairs. A very good book. Some explanation, some answers, some clarification you'll be able to find from this book. Now, because of our vexation, our defilements, our unhappiness, our misery, our suffering, the Buddha, with his compassion and wisdom, he pointed at a path. This is called the path of liberation, or the path of awakening. Now, in his book, The Way to Buddhahood, Venerable Xianzhi wrote that, and this is translated into English by Dr. Yang, in verse number 65, it goes like this. The way to liberation as taught by the Buddha is the Four Noble Truths and dependent origination. All the profound Buddha Dharma are evidenced by these. I know that I see some new faces here this morning, and you might not be very familiar with the terms, But like I said, don't get discouraged. We all start from step number 1, right? So what we can do is like, if you want to find out more information about this, the book that I recommend is a very good starting point. Now here in MABA, we have given various talks on both 4 Noble Truths and the 12 Links of Dependent Origination. Am I correct? We did, right? So today, I would like to give a very brief introduction of the 4 Noble Truths from a more commentary and conceptual. I won't call it conceptual, maybe more commentary or perspective, different perspective. But then in my coming following talks of this year, I'm going to stay on this topic, the 4 Noble Truths, step by step, in more depth, in more detail. So if you're interested, you can look at our schedule to see, what are the Dharma talk schedules. Now, according to Venerable Insun, apart from the 4 Noble Truths and the dependent origination, there is no other major or core teachings of the Buddha. This is it. This is it. Especially at the mundane, supra-mundane level. Of course, at the mundane level, we still talk about the 4 truths and the dependent origination. But especially at the supra-mundane level. In other words, there are many methods, techniques, concepts that you can find in the Buddhist texts or sutras or suttas. The purpose of these are only to explain and help us realize the 4 Noble Truths and to understand the concept of the dependent origination. Now, when we heard about, just like before we talk about the Dharma, the practice and the service, we think about, there are 3 things, right? Same thing, when we hear the 4 Noble Truths and the dependent origination, we would think that they're 2 different concepts, 2 different teachings. In fact, they're very tightly, closely connected and interdependent. I'll try to explain why later. Now let's now share this important teaching of the Buddha. There are different levels in learning the Dharma, in learning the Buddha's teaching. We can start with the mundane level and gradually penetrate deeper and deeper. This is just like when we go to college. When you're a freshman in college, you start with what? You start with Chemistry 101 or Accounting 101. So, but then when you get into a higher class, you're actually penetrating, going into more detail and more deeper level. This holds true with the studying of the 4 Noble Truths. So let's again revisit what are the 4 Noble Truths. First is the fact of suffering, or misery, if you like to call it, or dissatisfaction, if you like to call it. The next truth is the cause of suffering. The third one is cessation of suffering. And the fourth is the Noble Eightfold Path. Like I mentioned, there are 2 levels. One is the mundane, the other is the supra-mundane level. At the mundane level, we can study the 4 truths by understanding what are the meaning of them. Suffering, what type of suffering? There are actually 3, 5, 8 types of suffering. I won't go into details about that. The cause or the root of suffering. I just mentioned those 3. What are the causes? Craving, aversion, ignorance. And we have to understand that even though we talk about suffering, suffering, bring suffering. This is nothing that is depressing or negative. Because the Buddha said that, hey, here's the path. You can actually come out of it. So how? This comes to the fourth truth, the Noble Eightfold Path. Okay, we practice the right view, right intention, right speech, right concentration, etc., etc. So this is how, at the mundane level, that we learn, and then we implement, we apply these concepts or these learnings into our daily life. Okay, we can do that. The mundane level, you might think that, this is just for the beginner. No. These are the foundations. It's just like you're building a house. You have to pour the concrete so that you have a solid foundation. Understanding, learning, and practicing are the foundation of a tall building. Before we have this foundation solidly laid out, we are not able to take the next step. So we talk about the truth. What is the meaning of truth? Truth means factual, real, certainty, righteous, and very important, as it is. Not something we created without emotion and motion. As the things is, as it is. Now we first admitted that, they're suffering, their, dissatisfaction in life. Then why? Why are we born here? Why do we have to suffer? Suffering is not a cause, it's a fruition, it's the effect. What we did before brings us here. What our wishes, very simple. I came from a different culture on the other side of the ocean. I have this willpower, I have this wish, vow that one day I would come to the United States as a student. Without that wish, that vow, that kind of quote unquote action energy, karmic energy, I won't have the incentive to search my way, doing a lot of studying, taking a lot of exams, going through the immigration department, getting my visa, buying an airplane ticket to come here. So those are the actions that I took so that I end up here in the United States, which I'm very happy about. Okay? So we were born here as human. We were born here with our gender, personality, with the group of friends, within the community. It is because our action that took us here. Okay. So suffering, facing the death, facing sickness, facing old age, you have nobody else to blame but yourself. Because your action brings you here. Your wish brings you here. So suffering is a fluctuation. It's an effect. So let's find out the cause. If there is an effect, there is a result, there must be some cause. Nothing comes from nothing. Have you seen the Sound of Music? Yeah. That is one of the song, right? Nothing comes from nothing. Nothing ever could. So we're already here, so what should we do? Would we like to continue to suffer? I don't think anybody would like to, continue to face all these things. And we cannot rely on some supernatural power and say that, hey, Caddy, I like you. Let me wave my magic wand and say, you're out of suffering. We're answerable for our own actions. So what are the causes? And then we know that if we work, because our action brings us here, we can perform actions to unbring us here. Okay? So cessation of suffering. And then we know that to practice the Noble Eightfold Path, that it's going to be the actions that we should do. Now, at the supramundane level, it's just like you wind the toy. Have you seen the toy that, the very simple mechanical toys that you wind? And then when you unwind it, they put it down, and then the toy will jump around. And then when the energy expires, when the winding expires, you're released. So at the supramundane level, it's just reversing the process. So before I go on, I would like to mention that, and I forgot this, the source of my talk is based on the book The Way to the Buddhahood by Venerable Insun, and then also from, I'm taking an online course from a Venerable Xianzhi, his teaching and his class notes. Now I mentioned that the teaching of the Four Noble Truths is very closely connected to the teaching of 12 links of interdependent origination. Now based on the teaching of the, how are they related? This is what I want to share with you. Now, based on the teaching of the dependent origination, that we will by studying the dependent origination, we will be able to understand the first two truths. The first two, suffering and the cause of suffering. Okay, let me briefly say something about the dependent origination. There are 12 links. That is why we call the 12 links of dependent origination. Caused by ignorance, volition arises. Caused by volition, consciousness arises. Caused by consciousness, name and form arises. Caused by name and form, the sixth sense basis arises. Caused by the six senses, contact arises. Caused by contact, feeling arises. Caused by feeling, desire arises. Caused by desire, grasping arises. Caused by grasping, existence arises. Caused by existence, birth arises. Caused by birth, all the suffering, such as old age, sickness, and death arises. That might give you a little bit of the answer why we're here. Okay? The original cause is what? Craving and ignorance. Right? If we want to talk about the 12 lines, it's going to take an entire year of Dharma talk to go through each one of them in detail. So now we talk about the first two. So how about the third and fourth? It says here, through the teaching of dependent origination, will we understand the third and the cessation and the fourth noble eightfold path. So it's just like the first two, suffering and cause of suffering. It's explaining why. And then the next two, through the dependent origination, will be able to unwind. It's just like I explained. I mentioned that from the beginning last time, or we don't know when, that we generate a lot of, because we perform actions every single minute. You like it or not. We perform actions. You may say, I'm sitting here, what kind of action that I'm performing? Sitting is an action. You're sitting here, where's your mind? That is your mental action. Our action continues 24/7. Every action generates certain energy. That is what is called the karmic energy. Now when the conditions become favorable, these actions, this energy is going to give rise to fruitions and effect. So the key point is, doesn't matter how much energy that we generate, we're not trying to eradicate or reduce the energy is going to be there anyway. So what shall we do? The key point is to eradicate our defiance, to get rid of the root, to cut off the root, to uproot. Okay? Whatever done has been done. There is no way to reverse them. We cannot chase back to yesterday. But we can hold on and practice today so that we make sure we do not generate any more new karma. Okay? So to do that, we need to eradicate or get rid or cut off or break out our defilements. I'm going to go into two perspectives of the Four Noble Truths. Now, very commonly, Buddhist scholars or commentators, especially in the Mahayana tradition, would think that the teaching of the Four Noble Truths and dependent origination are the teachings for the Savakas. Savakas are those who listen to the Dharma taught by the Buddha or the Pratyeka Buddhists. According to Master Venerable Insun, he said that many of the profound concepts of the Mahayana school are actually explained or demonstrated through the teaching of the Four Noble Truths and the dependent origination. Venerable Insun mentioned that the difference between the two traditions is that the Savaka tradition focused more on explaining the first two truths, suffering and cause of suffering, while the other tradition, the Mahayana tradition, emphasized very heavily on the cessation and the noble paths, especially the cessation. And from this perspective, the essence, the teaching, the core, is the teaching of the Four Noble Truths, whether they're Mahayana or Savaka tradition. The teaching of the Four Noble Truths and the dependent origination. The difference is only on emphasis. But from another perspective, according to the Sumala Sutra, keep in mind this is a Mahayana Sutra. Okay? The Four Noble Truths of the Savaka tradition is to consider, I don't like to use Hinayana tradition, so I use the Savaka tradition. The Four Noble Truths of the Savaka tradition is considered to be measurable or purposeful. So their Four Noble Truth is measurable and purposeful. Now the Four Noble Truths of the Mahayana tradition is considered to be infinite or non-purposeful. Okay? Again, remind you, this is from a Mahayana Sutra. For the Savaka traditioners, the Savaka practitioners, their goal is to attain Nirvana. They focus on eradicating, just like we just mentioned, their purpose, their focus is on eradicating their defilements, to put an end to their sufferings, because they realize the suffering. They actually realize the suffering. The suffering of what? the suffering of existence. You have these 5 aggregates. We are here in this world. We're facing different types of miseries. They actually feel it, experience it, heavily, focus on that. So they want to come out of the cycle of the rebirth. And their goal is to attain arahantship. Don't worry about the terms, like I said. Now, to them, suffering is real. Suffering is real. Nobody can argue about that. It's real. You pinch yourself, it hurts. It's that real. Okay. So to them, suffering is real. And they think that they want to find the cause of suffering. So they're working very hard to put a stop, put an end, to cease that kind of suffering. So they also practice very hard on the Noble Eightfold Path in order to achieve the goal of liberation. Now, in this case, to them, practicing the Four Noble Truths is factual. There is something called the Four Noble Truths for them to learn, to understand, to practice, and they are actually suffering that they can come out with. I know that this is going to make you very confused. You just say that, let's face the fact that life is full of misery, suffering, and you're now telling me that, well, there is a group of people who think that they are real. Are they not? If you want to know the answer, you have to come to my next talk. So, this group of people, the Savakas, they think that practicing the Four Noble Truths is factual, is measurable. If I take this step, if I practice this, I will be able to advance on this path. So they're measurable. Okay? And there is a purpose, of course. They have a goal. The goal is to attain arahantship. Now, as for the true Mahayana practitioners, their goal is to attain Buddhahood. The state of a Buddha is not comparable to the state of an arahant. The wisdom of a Buddha is infinite. Therefore, the realization of the Four Noble Truths is immeasurable, complete, ultimate, and non-purposeful. Okay? Now, from this perspective, the difference of the Noble Truths of these two traditions is evaluated from the conventional perspective and the ultimate perspective. I have to apologize that I threw a lot of terms, and these are the Buddhist terms. And I apologize if I confuse you more than ever, but this is my technique. This is my trick to lure you into studying, finding out, penetrate deeper into the teaching of the Buddha. So I hope this will inspire or generate your curiosity of what is going on, what is she talking about? So dig deeper. I would like to stop here. This is my first talk on this topic, and I'm going to continue next time. May all beings be happy. May all beings be peaceful. May all